Hello and welcome to Balance Act. Hope you all had a great week. So today I wanted to explore something a little different. It's more of something I like to explore with you. It's not something that I'm telling you or something I've learned, but something that's a mystery to me still. And that's kind of the point of this channel anyway, is to explore the mysteries of the universe, so to speak. But I'm trying to do it from a lens of looking at what one side of a coin thinks about things versus another side of the coin thinks about things. But it's two sides of the same coin, because it seems to me that people that take a stoic, maybe you can even say right-handed or right-winged idea of approaching something versus people that take a more spiritual, metaphysical, or even say left-wing approach to things. But I always try to avoid it looking political. It's just that people who tend to be right-wing or U.S. Republican tend to think in a way that's more practical and stoic, versus people on the left side or Democratic side, they tend to be a little bit more spiritual in this sense of how I view spirituality. Because in our country too, spirituality on the right side, that's usually a more of a practical religion. So usually Christianity, obviously, but growingly also Islam or the Muslim religion. A lot of people from the Muslim religion are becoming more right-wing or more conservative in this country. And just exploring those two sides, you see people on both sides are really trying to get to the same place, which is a sense of love, happiness, success, just to basically bring their lives to a satisfying place. And they have two very different ways of getting there, but it seems like the concepts of getting there and the reasons for getting there are the same on either side, which is love, connection, satisfaction, protection of the family unit, and also your family going into the future with love, success, happiness, satisfaction, security. It's the same thing. So for me personally, I'm starting to build a belief system around myself where I think a lot of people are starting to build the same belief system, which is kind of a roll down the middle aspect. I think of Joe Rogan. I think he's very much like that. And what I find odd is that people from both sides, both polarized side, kind of pull at him, right? So you have people on the right that just kind of take him in. And he's very much a very left-wing, if you actually listen to him, he's very much a very left-wing, very liberal individual. But people on the right take him because he accepts certain things that they enjoy. So he loves the idea of the military and law enforcement. He's also an avid big game hunter. I'm not sure he's a big game hunter, but he hunts elk. And so they take him. He's a gun enthusiast as well. At least he promotes the Second Amendment. He's also rarely votes Republican. He's into psychedelic drug use and what it could possibly mean. He's also in for things like supporting the poor and allowing social services to support people, having basically kind of a social safety net. So he does believe in some socialist ideals, which are very left wing. He's open to the ideas of alternative realities, things that he's experienced doing psychedelic drugs, and also alternative ways of looking at spirituality and so forth, which is also very left wing. So he's very agnostic in that way. But I find it very interesting how the left, because he's more leftist, completely rejects him because of the whole idea of him. They think he's anti-vax, but really what he was curious about the vaccine, because he knew people. He was all ready to take the vaccine actually at one point, but then he started hearing about his friends taking the vaccine and having seizures. So he's like, "What's that all about?" So then he explored into it and couldn't get a concrete answer if the vaccine was safe. And so then he just decided, no, I'm good. I'm okay. I'm good. And then he got COVID twice and recovered fairly fast. But then it was interesting to see the left attack him and then just be like, fuck Joe Rogan. He's an anti-vax motherfucker, you know, and he's the reason why why we're all still in this situation. And that wasn't the case at all. He just had questions that couldn't be answered, and he decided for himself, I'm just not taking the vaccine. And I just thought it was crazy how everybody then polarized, and they were like, nope, he's anti-vax, he's bad, he's evil, he's alt-right, right-wing dude, and that's just the end of it. Because he'll talk to people for the right. He'll agree with some things from them, but he's very left. So I just found that interesting, like how, you know, you're damned if you believe anything from one side or the other. So really my question is, should we be dismissive of people because there are things that they believe that we don't agree with? We may fundamentally not agree with, but then there may be things that they believe that we do agree with. So recently, Andrew Tate has come onto my radar. And as an individual, I fundamentally don't agree with on many things, especially when it comes to gender roles. And he's a very interesting dude. You know, we have some similarities. You know, he grew up, maybe not in the best of neighborhoods. And I didn't grow up that rough, honestly. But, you know, I grew up in a fairly low income area. It was an Italian neighborhood, and it was difficult. I'll put it that way, growing up there. But I'm sure he probably grew up rougher than I did. But he also was into kickboxing. He's several years younger than me, and you know, he could be like my little brother, honestly. And I was just listening to him. He's a very angry individual, and he's angry on purpose. He said he eats one meal a day, drinks a bunch of caffeine and nicotine, and takes a bunch of nicotine to kind of keep that angry edge, you know. And I think that edge is what energizes him and motivates him, you know. And so I was listening to him. Sometimes I listen to people with alternative views from me or views that I disagree with on purpose to try to get their opinions on things and why they think the way they think. So I was listening to Tucker Carlson interview Andrew Tate, and it was very interesting. And there's a lot of points he made that I did agree with, especially around young men needing to better grasp or better hold on to their masculinity for happiness. And I was like, I agree with that, because I've noticed that like there seems to be this kind of degrading of masculinity. You can come up with the term toxic masculinity, which is a made up term. You know, I don't believe there's any such thing as a toxic masculinity. I believe there are weak men out there that can use their masculinity and they can weaponize it, and then thus they become bullies, and then thus they're not really being masculine. You know, like, you know, what they're being at that point is chauvinistic. You know, if you want to take your manhood, jump inside of a giant pickup truck and start driving around like an asshole on the highway, cutting people off while you wear mirror glasses, that's not being masculine. That's being chauvinistic. You know, you're using something that you think is very manly, and then you can, you know, use it to basically bully people on the road. And, you know, that's nonsense. You know, you'll see stuff like that often. You know, we have fathers that constantly yell at their children and constantly hit their children. They're using their size and their loud, deep voice to tyrannize their family. That's called being chauvinistic, abusive. That's not being masculine. So there's no such thing to me really as toxic masculinity, where there's people that will try to use their masculine traits to bully others out of a sense of fear. So there's already a word for that. It's called chauvinism. It's a very negative thing. So yeah, I think the classic idea of masculinity should be embraced by a lot of young men. Doesn't have to be embraced by everyone. That's one thing I disagreed with him, is that he almost had this idea that you ought to be that way, and women ought to be this way, and men ought to be that way, and la la la. And I'm like, I don't know about that. There's a lot of masculine women out there who want to do very masculine jobs, like being police officers, being in the military, special operatives, all that kind of stuff. What about them? What about very feminine men? What about them? What are you going to do with them? Tell them to man up. It's like they don't want to man up. So it's just like there should be a freedom of choice. But if you choose to be more of a classic masculine person, you ain't hurt nobody, and you have a woman that wouldn't mind taking a more traditional role as a wife and as a caretaker of a home with her kids, and allow the man to provide for the family. If she's happy with that, then let her be, and that's my view on that. So I take a very centrist view on those sort of things. So I was listening to Andrew Tate. He's probably a person I probably wouldn't want to sit down and have dinner with, and but he made some really good points that I agreed with, and then it had me thinking. I was like, if I was to talk to a friend of mine who's fundamentally very much left-leaning, and I told them I agree with some things that Andrew Tate says, would they then, because it's probably a person that they would dismiss, would they then dismiss me? Would they throw me out as a friend of the person because there were some things I agree with Andrew Tate? And could I tell them, would it be gray area allowed then? Where I'd be like, oh hey, but I mostly just don't agree with this guy, like I don't know if I would want to meet this guy in person, I just don't agree with him. But listening to this interview, I'm like, there's some points that he made. So this is an interview with Andrew Tate? Yeah, a Tucker Carlson interview. What would happen then? So it just had me thinking, why are we like this right now? Like, and is it healthy? I don't think it is. The things I've learned from listening to Jordan Peterson, that's another one who I fundamentally don't agree with, but also makes very good points. And if I was just to throw out Patrick Bet-David, another one, I've learned so much from him. But then, since he's more of a Republican person, more Republican leaning, do I just throw him out? It doesn't make any sense to me. And even on the left side, there's things that that Abraham Hicks teaches I don't necessarily agree with, and things that Gabby Bernstein and some of her views that I don't necessarily agree with. Do I just not listen to them? And so I believe that there needs to be more of an acceptance of different views, and I think there needs to be more of an allowing of letting people speak, because Alan Watts was just saying in a thing I was just listening to, where people could tell you this thing, people tell you that thing. You can totally believe what the Bible says, or you can just see the Bible as being something that's a little bit more subjective, and you can take your own meaning out of it. But really, no matter what anyone's telling you, whether it's a priest, whether it's somebody in a political party, whether it's a TikTok influencer or whatever, it really comes down to you, to what you believe. So we're always going to hold our own personal beliefs on the inside, but then sharing those beliefs with someone else, and then deciding that you maybe agree with something that a person that you generally wouldn't agree with, or even your friend group wouldn't agree with, and then not being able to express that outwards, I think there's something wrong there. So I'm curious about what you think about this. So if anyone who is watching this video could leave comments at the bottom and let me know what you think. If you watched to the end of this video, I know this video didn't have much of a subject to it, but I do appreciate you watching if you did. But I'm curious, what is your opinion of listening to people who you don't agree with, and then taking points out of what they're saying that you do agree with, and then being able to share that with someone else? Like, would you have the brevity to do so? Like, would you want to do so? Or would you be afraid to do so because you're afraid of that person, your friend, now dismissing you? Because you might agree something that Joe Rogan says, or that Andrew Tate says, or that Patrick Bet-David or Jordan Peterson says, and they, would be like, how dare you? What if you agreed something that Donald Trump believes? Oh no, we're gonna do that. So anyway, I'm curious to see what your opinion on this is. Thank you for watching another episode of Balance That. I'll see you next week. I'll have more of a subject to talk about next week, I'm sure, but I definitely wanted to explore this idea this week, and so thank you for bearing with me. May you find your path between the practical and the metaphysical to your own best path to wellness and happiness.